In today's video, we are going to be covering the NFC West. Subscribe and like the video if you do go on to enjoy. Let's hop into it. Now, before the video starts, I am super sick right now, so if I sound terrible for the full video, I do apologize, but I'll do my best. The way the video is going to work is we are going to begin by starting off by talking about each individual team, starting from worst to best. Then after that, we're going to talk about the future of the division and kind of the division dynamics. And then at the very end, I'll be predicting what the NFC West will look like in 2025. Let's go ahead and start off with the San Francisco 49ers. And yes, the Niners, which were the team that made it to the Super Bowl in 2023 and have been one of the better teams in the 2020s, they went 6-11 last year and were the worst team in the NFC West. Now, with this Niners team, it is extremely important to talk about the context as to why this team was so bad. They were absolutely pummeled with injuries the entire season. I'm talking guys like Ayuk, Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey missed a lot of time. I think Debo missed some time as well. Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, Travis Ward had his own set of issues. And even though without the injuries, even if the team was fully healthy, I don't necessarily think this Niners team was quite yet like Super Bowl contenders. I think they took a big step back from 23 to 24. But if this team was fully healthy, I do think they probably end up winning the division. I think they probably win like 11 or 12 games. Maybe they win their first matchup. Maybe they even win their second matchup. I think the Eagles still would have ended up winning the NFC, but a healthy Niners team potentially could have met them in the NFC Championship game or something along those lines. But in this most recent offseason, the Niners had a really rough offseason for the most part. Now, I don't necessarily think that they lost anything of extreme importance. I think they lost a few pieces, and I'm going to describe it. Think of it as like a overly stuffed teddy bear. Last year and in years beyond, prior to the injuries, they had a fully fluffed teddy bear that was 100% filled. You could not add in any more extra cotton or anything like that. This past off season, they lost about 35 to 45% of that cotton, which means that, you still have a teddy bear. You can still cuddle with the teddy bear. It's still a teddy bear. Still a pretty dang cool teddy bear, but it's just not as cool as when it had that 100% cotton. That's kind of how I look at this Niners team. It's still a very competitive team that honestly could still find a way to win the division, especially with how easy their schedule is, but they're clearly not as good as years prior. I have a lot of question marks with this team, a lot on the defense, especially surrounding Nick Bosa. You did draft Micah Williams. I like that pickup, but we'll have to wait and see there. The offensive line is still very questionable. The entire receiving core is completely up in the air right now, and you have a lot of people returning from injuries. I do not think 2025 will be a pretty year for San Francisco, but I do think they will be a bit of a more competitive team, especially if they do manage to stay healthy. Next, let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals, who in 2024 went 8-9, albeit they were actually a very competitive team. They actually had 400 points scored to only allowing 379 points allowed, which actually puts their net point average at plus 21, which is somehow higher than both Seattle and the Rams and San Francisco, of course, who Seattle and LA at least, were ahead of them in the actual standings. So that tells you that, Arizona was in a lot of games, and when you actually kind of look at what happened last year, they definitely were. They were 3-3 in the division, so very competitive. They won a lot of games they probably shouldn't have won, and, they lost a few games that were pretty darn close as well. If there was a team that I was willing to put a ton of money to take the biggest step forward in 2025, I think it would be the Arizona Cardinals. I think that's the case basically out of the entire NFL. I think Arizona is pretty dang loaded with talent. I love what they did on the defensive side by adding a number of veterans, but also adding in some young contributors like a Walter Nolan, potentially like a Will Johnson if he can stay healthy too. You pair that with an offense that for the most part is essentially the exact same, but you're really banking on that Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyler Murray connection to start really gelling. If you get that offense really going, and if this defense could take a big step forward with all the veterans now, like a Josh Sweat, Dalvin, Calais, and so on and so forth. Paired that with the potential chance that some of these younger guys can come in there and be a key contributor, again, like a Will Johnson and a Walter Nolan, then I think this Cardinals team is really primed to take a big year. Jonathan Gannon so far has checked, in my opinion, all the boxes. He was a solid competitive team in his first year. Last year, they took a bit of a step forward. And I think this year, the bar is set for me at about 10 wins. I think this Cardinals team needs to get to 10 wins. I think they need to make the wild card. They don't necessarily have to go like crazy in the playoffs. They don't have to go 3 rounds deep or make it to a Super Bowl, but just make it to the wild card and have a very competitive wild card game. And we're building towards the future, and I'll feel really good about Arizona. One last little note here for Arizona. They got to be better on the road. They were 2-6 on the road compared to 6-3 at home. I'm not really going to look too far into that. I'm not going to say that Gannon needs to, prepare differently or Kyler has to work differently. I'm not going to say anything like that. If it becomes a trend next year, then we'll talk about that in more detail, when it does need to be talked about. For now, just want to kind of throw it out there. This Cardinals team, I think, will be really good next year in 2025. I think they are a very talented roster, and I am one of the few Kyler Murray believers out there, which I think is kind of weird to say. Moving over to the team that fell in second place last year and just barely missed the playoffs, let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks. Last year, they went 10-7, and they were actually kind of the inverse of the Arizona Cardinals. They were surprisingly 3-6 at home, which is bizarre because, that's like one of the best home field advantages in the NFL, and 7-1 on the road. This was an offseason of a lot of changes. Over the course of the last 3 or so years now, you've kind of had this, Geno Smith-led core of Geno, DK, Lockett, and then of course the previous year you had a JSN, Kenneth Walker, and of course you had Charbonnet eventually. It's been a very similar team the past few years, and offensively speaking, the offense has felt like it's just gotten kind of worse and worse, even though they are probably more talented than before. And I'm not really somebody who likes to point the blame at, oh, it's Geno's fault, or oh, it's DK's fault, or oh, it's the OC's fault. I kind of think it was a multitude of reasons. I think for me, the biggest reason why this team really struggled last year at times was because of the offensive line. There was times last year where the offensive line would only give Geno half a second to, get into his drop back and make progressions before he would get sacked or he would get pressure up his face and he'd have to move in the pocket. And there was no consistent ground game either. So the team at points got very, unbalanced, and they were having to pass a lot more than probably what they would have liked. Now this upcoming season though, you did add to your offensive line. I still think the offensive line has some general concerns, but if it can stay healthy with both those tackles, I think the offensive line should be better, which then can make the entire offense better. It's also a very good destination for a guy like Darnold. It's a lot of talented pieces there, and I love the combination of JSN, Cooper Kupp, Elijah Arroyo at tight end, who's probably going to take over the starting role. I really do like this receiving core and everything like that. My one concern for Seattle is I think they're going to be a very rhythm-based offense. An offense that when they're out of sorts, out of rhythm, they're going to be really, really bad. But I also do think the opposite applies here too. When their offense is in sync and when their offense is functioning at a high level, the offensive line is protecting well, Darnold is passing the ball effectively, then you're going to see the Seattle team be able to put up points. But I think they have to find a way to get in rhythm early, effectively run the football, use the play action, motions, a lot of stuff underneath. I do not think this will be a very potent offense. I don't think they'll be top 15 next year, which honestly is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. I do think there is a building process here of getting the Seattle offense up to speed. I will say, I think defensively, though, is really where this team can take the big step. Obviously, now you're year two under your head coach, Mike Macdonald. He did a fine job in his first season. Definitely not a perfect job. He helped the defense in a lot of ways. I expect them to get even better this upcoming year. More continuity, new pieces like a DeMarcus Lawrence and some of the drafted players, too. This defense will take a nice step forward. They got a nice set of pass rushers, a nice set of run stuffers, some good linebackers. Their secondary has some names that I like as well, too. So Seattle defensively will be a lot better, and I think that's kind of how they take that step forward. Now, here's my one concern for Seattle. I don't really know what their upside is. I think they will be a very competitive team that can compete with anybody out there. But I also think that it's a Seattle team that is going to be the underdog against most competent playoff rosters, and they're probably going to find a way to lose a couple of these, weaker matchups. Like, for example, if Seattle goes in there and they face the New York Giants or the Saints or the Panthers, right? I could see the Seattle Seahawks being one of those teams that, hey, we just can't find a rhythm. Brian Burns and Abdul Carter are absolutely cooking our quarterback, and we're losing the game because we just can't find that rhythm offensively and our defense just can't hold up. Not saying I would predict Seattle to, lose to a New York or anything like that, but I'm just kind of throwing the example out there. So no, I don't think Seattle's quite yet like a title contender or anything like that. I do think they're a very good team, kind of like how they've been the past few years. I think you will see improvements from this roster, from the coaching staff, from the players, from everything, but I don't necessarily know if it's going to equate to a ton more wins on your win-loss record. And then lastly, let's talk about the LA Rams and say hi to my cat. Now, the LA Rams did win the division last year. They went 10-7, a bit of a late run to get into the wild card. Eventually, they did make that little bit of a run there in the playoffs and, gave Philadelphia an actual and genuine run for their money in the playoffs. The LA Rams, I thought looked really good when they were finally healthy last year. And in this offseason, you add in a Devontae Adams, you get some development from some of the younger guys on your defense, you maintain your offensive line, you maintain Stafford, you get a new tight end, you add a linebacker in Pupal Jr. This is going to be a really, really good team. Now, if you guys are interested in hearing more about my personal thoughts about the LA Rams, if you check out my podcast, we did about a full hour-long LA Rams video where we go over their offense, defense, offseason. We predict their season, how many wins they're going to get, how far they'll make in the playoffs. And spoiler alert, they do pretty darn good in that video. So keep an eye out for that. I'll have it pinned in the description below. So if you do want to check that out, check the description, as well as it might be in the pinned comment as well. When it comes to the LA Rams, there's a lot to like here, man. I think they're a solid defense with a multitude of pass rushers. I think they'll be solid against the run. I don't necessarily think they have that like lockdown prime Jalen Ramsey back there, but I think they have a number of guys who just get the job done. And when you have pass rushers that could absolutely get after the quarterback, it does make their job quite a bit easier. The big thing for the LA Rams is just going to be, can they stay healthy? Can they keep Matthew Stafford upright for, 17 and hopefully 20 plus games if you want to make that title run? And can the defense just take some steps forward in the right direction and find a way to stop Saquon Barkley? That's going to be one of the bigger concerns later in the season. But it's a Rams team with a fairly easy schedule. I do want to mention the entirety of this division does not have like a brutal schedule. Like if you look at the Niners schedule, the Niners very well are going to probably win 10 plus games off the back of just how goddamn easy that schedule is. And for the Rams, their schedule is not the hardest either, though they do have some pretty competitive matchups throughout the year. So that is it for the team portion of this. Let's go and talk about the division dynamics. So in this section, I really just want to focus in on, is this a young division? Is this an old division? What does this division look like 3 to 4 to 5 years down the road? And I gotta be honest with you, it's a bit of a unique division where you have rosters that are a bit older, but you can still see them being very good 3 to 4 years down the road here, especially if things kind of, stay put in some ways. The team that I am most concerned about for their future, of course, would be San Francisco. You just paid Brock Purdy, and I'm a big Brock guy. I think he's probably, to me, about a top 15 quarterback. I think he can totally get the job done, but you just paid him a lot of money. We all know how difficult it is to, be a competent title contender when you have a 50 whatever $million quarterback. I still think San Francisco will be competitive because their most talented pieces will still be good 3 to 4 years down the road. But realistically speaking, I do worry the most about them. They're a very top-heavy team that if they can't find a way to build a contender within the next 2 to 3 years, I do think they're probably going to be primed to fall off a bit of a cliff here in the upcoming seasons if they don't play their cards right. The nice thing about San Francisco, though, they are a team that is sneaky good at drafting, especially later in drafts. They just kind of find those little bit of steals here and there that keep them afloat. So we'll see if they can pull off that magic this year and in future years. The team that I'm second most concerned about in this division, I guess it would be the Seahawks. Now, I will say it's a pretty big gap. I think I'm not really too worried about the Seahawks' future. I guess the only thing for me that I'm a little bit worried about with Seattle is, what if the Darnold situation doesn't work out? If Darnold doesn't work out, what's your long-term plan at quarterback? Is it realistically going to be a Jalen Milroe, or is it going to be somebody in a future quarterback draft class? Again, I'm not too worried about them. I'm more just worried about, I don't think Darnold's a top 15 quarterback in the league. And I also do think that also kind of does limit their potential to win a title. If Darnold cannot become like a top 15 quarterback, then Seattle's going to have no shot to win a title. The other thing I'll say about Seattle is I kind of just worry that they're going to end up being, and I don't mean this in like a evil or, condescending way. I do worry a little bit for them about becoming like the little brother of the division, meaning that you have this one really good team, and maybe it's LA, maybe it's Arizona, maybe San Francisco can turn it around. And then you have that team right below them that's also really good, but just not quite as good as that other team, right? I can't really think of a great example like the Packers for the past couple years with Rodgers. Some really great Packers teams, and they were the big dog in that NFC North for years, and teams like Detroit and Minnesota, even when they were good, really struggled to overcome the Green Bay Packers. I do kind of worry about that with this West, specifically with Seattle, but again, I'm not too worried about it. The team that I think has the brightest future, honestly, is probably going to be the LA Rams. They're a very young team that is going to have a hard time replacing some of their vets. But when Stafford retires, it's a very young core to surround a young quarterback. I personally believe that this upcoming draft in 2026, they're going to draft a quarterback, and we'll see if Stafford decides to retire this year, next year, or 2 years from now. Either way, I think the Rams will be totally fine because they have a great defense that is super young, an offense that is also very young. Yes, you'll lose Stafford. You might also lose Adams in a few years, but you have Puka Nacua locked in. You have a pretty young offensive line, a young tight end now, a young defensive line. Like, this Rams team has done such a good job of drafting and acquiring young assets that I don't really worry about them at all. I also don't really worry about Arizona. For Arizona, I guess the question is just, can Kyler Murray elevate his game to become a Super Bowl caliber quarterback? That's the big concern for them. All in all, this is a very exciting division that I think is going to be kind of a toss-up division for multiple years until one of these teams can really just claim the division over and over again. It's going to be interesting. It'll be fun. For now, let's talk about the 2025 NFL season, and let me give you guys some predictions. Now, in this section, I will not say exactly how many games they're going to win. Like, I'm not going to say San Francisco is going to win 13 games specifically. No, I'm going to give you a range of what I think they'll win. So I'll try to keep it to like a 4 to 3 game range, like, for example, like a 10 to 13 win sort of range. For starters, let's start off from the bottom. In the 4th seed of the NFC West, I have the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Seahawks fans are going to kill me. I love you guys. I think this is a building year for you guys. I think the defense will take a big step forward. By the way, NFC West to me is one of the best divisions in the NFL. I truly do believe that there is so much talent to go around here that there is a chance that all 4 of these teams win 9 to 10 games. So for Seattle, I think their range of games is somewhere between 9 to 12 wins, meaning 9, Darnold doesn't play very well, and you're kind of just a middling team with a good defense, but not a great defense. 12, though, it means that you're probably a wild card team, or you're potentially trying to win the division. Darnold really does work out, and he's great next year. The offensive line is not that injured. It stays healthy. The receiving core works out, and the defense takes a big step forward. So I'm thinking 10 wins again. I talked about it a bit earlier in the Seattle video. I think there will be improvements from here that you really will not see in the record books. So again, I'm going to say somewhere between 9 to 12 wins. In 3rd place, I'm going to go with the Arizona Cardinals. Now, again, I do think Arizona is going to take a big step forward this upcoming year, but the San Francisco 49ers schedule is just so goddamn easy that I think that because of their schedule, it being the way it is, it's going to elevate them over the likes of Seattle and Arizona. When it comes to Arizona, I think their range of wins is very similar to Seattle. I think it's somewhere between 9 to 12 wins. 9 being, yes, we took a step forward, but we didn't take the big step forward that we wanted to. We took a bit of micro step in the right direction. Maybe Gannon's job's on the line. We'll have to wait and see. 12 would be, we took a big step forward. Defensively, we are now a really good defense. Kyler showed that he can be a title contending quarterback. And in 2026, 2027, we got a lot to look forward to. I, again, am going to say that I think 10 to 11 wins is probably the number that I lean on, but we'll keep the range at 9 to 12. In 2nd place, I do have the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I'll say this. From a pure roster construction, I do not think San Francisco is the best team in this division. In fact, I kind of think based off rosters right now, there's an argument to be made that they are the 4th division, best division in this, division. But, and a big but here, their schedule is just ridiculously easy. Like, here, let's just look at it real quick. Before anyone gets mad at me for putting San Francisco in 2nd place, look at this schedule. Seattle, New Orleans, Arizona, Jacksonville, LA, Tampa Bay, Atlanta, Houston, New York, LA, Arizona, Carolina, Cleveland, Tennessee. Look at this stretch here. Indianapolis, Chicago, and Seattle. If you take away the competitive NFC West matchups where San Francisco is probably going to go 3-3 in those games, there is like no other serious challenges outside of like Houston. Like, this is a absolute cakewalk of a schedule. They're going to breeze through most of these games and just out talent certain teams. They're going to lose like 3 games in the division, and they'll probably lose like 1 or 2 other games in their entire schedule because of just how easy of a schedule they have. That's why they're in my 2nd place. They are not in my 2nd place because I think they are a better constructed roster than Seattle or Arizona, nor do I think their coaching advantage is that great over the likes of Seattle and Arizona, but their schedule is just so easy. They're literally facing like no serious title contender outside of the NFC West. Whereas you look at the Rams, they got like Baltimore, they got Philly, they got Detroit. San Francisco has none of those matchups. Their hardest non-divisional matchup is the Chicago Bears or the Houston Texans. And I love Houston. I love Chicago. those teams are not probably contending for titles next year. And San Francisco is probably going to lose to Houston, by the way. So I just think their division or their schedule is just so easy that's going to allow them to win a lot of games. And they do have the top end talent to be a really competitive team. So it's unfortunate they're going to be in my second place, because if their schedule was just a normal, competitive, difficult schedule, they would easily probably be my number 4 seed again. In terms of a range of games for the San Francisco 49ers, I'm going to predict somewhere between 10 to 13 wins next year. Again, off the backs of a really easy schedule. Let's now go ahead and talk about my winner of the division for back-to-back years. I have the LA Rams. Now, I'm going to say that injuries are a-okay. They come out the gates, for the most part, pretty dang healthy. Maybe Matthew misses a game or two, but he stays healthy for the most part this year. Same with the entirety of the roster. Injuries do happen, and you have to take that into account, but we're just going to suppose that injuries don't play a massive factor for the Rams 2025 season. If this team is healthy, they have the pieces to be dominant on both sides. Their schedule is not the most difficult schedule in the world. I think they have a lot of winnable matchups. I will say it's a lot more difficult than San Francisco, but they're going to be battle tested. They're not going to be surprised when they make it to the playoffs. I think they win the division. I think their range is somewhere between 12 to 13 games. I think it'll be one of those two. And I think that they will cruise to the division. They'll win the division title. Good chance if they are the 13th seed that they end up with the number 1 seed. So keep that in your back pocket. Could all be very interesting. I think they're a very talented team. But here is my predictions for the NFC West. Again, I have LA first, San Francisco 2, Arizona 3, and Seattle 4. Let me know in the comment section below, do you agree or disagree? And again, if you do disagree, hopefully you guys can see my points that I made in this video. Subscribe and like the video if you do enjoy. Love you guys. Peace.